Greetings everyone, and welcome to this video series on modeling and texture painting in Blender. And as a quick overview, we will be first modeling this low poly X, and then adding our UV seams and UV unwrapping the model in preparation for the texture painting. And this won't be a time lapse, it'll actually be done in real time, which probably means it'll be a fairly long series, maybe 10 parts or more. But we're going to be going through the different types of materials, like painting wood and various types of metal. It is recommended that you have a tablet for at least the painting portion of this video series, but not a requirement. And I will be talking about the differences between painting with a mouse and a tablet. Throughout this series, you will see keyboard commands show up on the screen for some of Blender's less commonly used features. So for those of you who are new to Blender, let's go over some of these common commands which will help you follow along with this series. The first one is the S key, which is the shortcut for scaling. And this is a pretty common action to do in modeling. The next one is the R key, which rotates any part of your object that's selected. And then we have G, which will grab and move any part of your mesh that is selected. You press G and then of course move it with the mouse. And then finally we have E, which extrudes from the mesh. So whatever part of your mesh that is selected, you can press E and it will extrude outward. So now we're ready to begin. I'm using version 2.79, which is the most current version at the time of this recording. And before getting started, I'm going to make a few changes to my viewport. The first of which is to get rid of the grid floor. There's a few different ways of doing this. If I scroll down under display, I can click only render, but that takes away the lights, the cameras. It doesn't show which object is selected. So I don't really prefer doing that. The better solution for me is to go down to where it says lines and just take it all the way down to 0. You can see if I increase this, I can make the grid floor really big. Take it all the way down, it just disappears entirely. And one more change I'd like to make: if I press 1 on the number pad to go to front view, and then 5 to go into orthographic view, we have this grid that it's just very small, and for whatever reason I find it distracting. So if I go over to my scene tab in the properties window and click it, I can go down to unit presets and just switch to inches. And now it makes the grid much bigger and I find it less distracting. Okay, so now we can delete the cube by pressing X and then choose delete. And you'll have to download this image for the modeling reference. There will be a link in the description, but once you have, you can click on background image and then click add image and then click open. And then navigate to wherever you saved the image. And select and then click open image. And now we have it, but I want to reposition this image to make the modeling a little easier. Actually, I want this little point here to be where the 3D cursor is. So we can do that by going down into the Add Image window. And the value slider on the right-hand side will move the image up and down, and the one on the left-hand side will move it left and right. So again, just trying to get that point right on the 3D cursor, but it doesn't have to be exact, just close. Okay, so now that that's done, I can also raise the opacity because right now it's 50% transparent. So I can raise the opacity all the way up to 1. And again, that's just personal preference. You can keep it a little opaque, but I'm going to take mine up. And I think we're ready. So now let's type Shift A and add a cylinder. And before we make any changes to it, let's come over to our toolbar on the left. And if this is closed, you can press T to open it. And we want to change the vertex count from 32 to 8. And it's really important to do this before you tab into edit mode because these options will disappear as soon as you do. You can also make some other changes like the fill type. I'm going to leave it at N-Gon for now. So now I'll tab into edit mode and press Z to go into wireframe mode. And then scale the cylinder down. And then use G to grab it and move it up to roughly where the top of the handle where it meets the blade of the axe. And I'll just scale this in some more and then rotate it to try to match the reference image. And the easiest way of doing that is just putting the center line of the cylinder on the middle line of the reference image, and then once they match up, then you know your rotation is right. Then I'm just going to scale this in so that it's about the same size as the thinnest part of the handle on the reference image. Now if I select the face at the top of the cylinder, I can use Alt-S to scale along the normals. And this allows you to scale in the direction that the reference image is going. So I can bring it up to just where the handle begins, and then select the bottom face of the cylinder and use Alt-S again to bring that up to about this point. And now I can use E to extrude, and then scale it up with the S key, and then extrude down again, and extrude again, and this time scale in. And so I will basically be doing this for the whole length of the handle, just following the reference image by extruding down and then scaling or rotating whenever it's necessary. I am sorry if it's a little difficult to see in wireframe, but that's why I'm actually using the face selection so that you can see the little dots on the fronts of each of the faces. And so far it's been pretty straightforward, like a pretty straight extrusion down, but now we're going to have to start rotating slightly because the handle does curve. So right here we'll just begin to rotate it a little so that it matches the reference. And then just make slight adjustments in the rotation as you go. Sometimes it'll be a little more drastic than others, like this one. This one's just a slight adjustment. And I keep matching that center vertex up with the reference image, the middle line. So I'm going to extrude all the way down to where the handle picks up again, and we're going to come back to the grip part of the handle. So again, just match that center vertex up here and then rotate it to match the reference image, and then scale it up. And then just continue on like you were before, just extruding down and scaling and rotating when needed. Actually, I modeled this thing like, I don't know, maybe 30 different ways before finally creating this reference image to use. But I was trying to design it in such a way that it would be really easy for someone new to Blender to model something that used a variety of different types of tools and keyboard shortcuts, but that wasn't too hard that they would just give up halfway through. So hopefully this is helpful to any of you who are just beginning to learn Blender. Okay, so we're almost done. We have this big piece, and then extrude down again and scale in, and then extrude down one more time and then scale it up. And now we have this face on the bottom, so we can just use Alt-P, which is the poke tool, and then go to Vertex Select and select that center vertex and use Alt-S to scale along the normals, which will create that spike. Now let's go back to the grip part of the handle. So we can press Z to go into wireframe, and Control R, which adds an edge loop in the middle. And so now we can move this over again so that center vertex is on the center line, and then we can just scale it up so it's the same width of that reference image. Then we'll press Control R again and match this one up as well. And let's add a third edge loop down here, Control R. And now I want to select these outer vertices I can use the C, which is the selection tool. I can select them and grab them so that they match the reference image here, and use these on the opposite side to do the same. Just selecting them, and I can scale them so that they line up. Okay, so now I'm going to go back up to the top of the grip, and I'm going to press Ctrl R and make another edge loop. And I'll position it about here. And I'll tab out of wireframe so that you can see what I'm doing in a moment, but I'm selecting all of these back vertices, and I'm pressing G on the keyboard twice and sliding it down so that it meets the edge loop below. And I'm going to do the same thing here for this one. Select the center vertices and the ones to the right of it, and press G twice and slide those down as well. And now one more edge loop here at the bottom, and position this one about here, and then these vertices will use G twice again and slide those up. And now if we select everything with A and press W, we can use our special menus to remove the doubles, and that removed 15 vertices. And now all that's left to be done is selecting the vertices and positioning them so that they match the reference image. So I can select these two and move them over with G and then rotate them. And do the same for these. Okay, so these are a little wide, so we can move those in, scale them on Y. And maybe scale these on Y as well, and maybe scale these out, give a little bit of shape to the grip. There we go, that looks pretty good. Okay, so now let's move on to the next part, which I think we'll just go ahead and do this spiky ring at the bottom. We'll tab into edit mode and type Shift A and choose a torus. And again, before we make any changes, we need to come over here. And the major segments I'm going to change to 8, and the minor segments to 6. And now I can scale this down and press RX90 to rotate it on the X-axis 90 degrees. Now if I hold Alt and right click on this edge, it will select the whole loop. And I can press X, which brings up the delete menu, and I can choose dissolve edges. So now this is just straight across. And now I'm going to scale it in and try to match the rotation of the reference image. Okay, so now I can use Alt-S to make the ring thicker or thinner. So that's about the right thickness. And I'm not terribly concerned with matching this up perfectly to the reference image. If it's a little off, it's fine. It just has to be close enough. So now to create those spikes, I'm going to, in vertex select these outer vertices, these 3, and we're going to bevel them. Ordinarily when you bevel, you would select a face or an edge and use Control B, but for vertex bevel, it's Shift Control B. And now you have beveled those vertices. And actually, we'll have to delete these, or will be doubles now, since they've merged with another vertex, but we can do that later. Right now I'm going to use Alt-P, which is the poke tool. And then over here in the settings, I'm going to take the poke offset all the way up, and that will create those spikes. So now I'm just going to hover over this and select it with L, and then rotate it so that it matches that reference a little more closely. Okay, so that part looks done. And I think I want to just continue on with the top part of this handle, and once it's finished, we'll call part 1 of this series done. So I can select the top face there and extrude up, and then scale. And then extrude all the way to the top. I think my East Coast accent just came out there a little bit, sorry. So extrude again. And scale in. And then extrude one more time. Rotate and scale. And now for the top, we're going to use the poke tool like we did for the bottom, Alt-P. And it did that because it kept the preset, the poke offset from the last time that we used it. So we just slide that value back down to something that matches the reference. But that's the end of the first part of this series. In part 2, we will finish the modeling, and then we will move on to UV unwrapping, and then finally the fun stuff, which is the painting. And if you guys are interested in following my work, you can find me on ArtStation. I'm also on social media, Facebook and Twitter. And I want to thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.